The heavy glass doors of the burger diner groaned as the group pushed inside. Uzi stood behind the counter, her hands resting on a mountain of unwashed dishes. She did not speak. She simply pointed at the sink. The message was clear. Taro and Lemon moved first, grabbing their stations and diving into the kitchen. The air instantly filled with the sharp hiss of patties hitting the grill. Jaden and N stepped into the line, taking orders as the crowd began to swell. Sherpa took the register, his fingers dancing across the keys with rhythmic precision. For hours, the diner became a machine of smoke and grease. Every movement was calculated. Every second was accounted for. The sound of shouting voices blended with the constant, aggressive sizzle of oil. They moved in a blur, passing plates, wiping counters, and refilling drinks without a moment to breathe. The floor grew slick, the heat rose, and the pressure mounted. Uzi walked to the front door, flipped the sign to closed, and twisted the lock. The click echoed through the empty room. She did not look back at the grease-stained counters or the mountain of dishes. Instead, she pulled a heavy set of keys from her pocket and walked toward the back exit. The group followed, their movements sluggish from the long shift. She pushed open the rear door, revealing a private hangar tucked behind the diner. A plane sat in the center of the concrete floor, its metal skin dull under the dim lights. Uzi tossed the keys to Sherpa. "We need the golden meat and the secret sauce," she said, her voice cutting through the lingering silence of the kitchen. They climbed into the cabin, the interior smelling of cold metal and old fuel. N scrambled into the cockpit, flipping switches until the engines groaned, then roared to life. The vibration traveled through the floorboards, shaking the exhaustion from their limbs. The plane taxied out, picked up speed, and lifted off the ground. The diner shrank into a tiny, dark speck below as they banked toward the horizon. They were heading toward the uncharted jungle. The plane banked hard, its wheels slamming into a narrow clearing choked with thick, wet ferns. The engine sputtered and died, leaving a ringing silence that was immediately replaced by the drone of insects. Uzi kicked the cabin door open, and the humid, heavy air rushed in, smelling of rot and damp earth. They stepped out, their boots sinking instantly into the thick, dark mud. The jungle was a wall of tangled vines. Uzi pointed toward a faint, unnatural shadow in the distance. They began to move, but the forest fought back. Jaden swung a heavy blade, hacking through a thick curtain of creepers. The vines snapped back, whipping against their legs. Taro and Lemon struggled to keep their footing, sliding in the slick sludge as they pushed deeper into the undergrowth. The heat was relentless. They moved in a line, hacking and stumbling, their breathing ragged, lost in the green. The final curtain of vines tore away, and the jungle floor leveled out into a clearing of ancient, moss-covered stone. Uzi stopped dead. She raised a hand, signaling the group to halt. 50 yards ahead, the temple entrance loomed, its stone archway carved with fading symbols. Near the base of the structure, 3 figures moved in the shadows. They were not alone. More figures emerged from the tree line, their movements precise and predatory. Uzi hissed a warning, her eyes locked on the rival chefs who were already fanning out to block the path. The group stood frozen for a heartbeat. Uzi broke the silence with a sharp gesture toward the altar. They bolted, boots pounded against the stone. The rival chefs surged forward, closing the gap with terrifying speed. They reached the altar, sliding to a halt. The rival chefs converged, forming a tight circle around them. The escape route was gone. The circle tightened. A rival chef lunged, hand outstretched to snatch the altar space, but Jaden shoved him back against the cold stone. The brawl exploded. Fists flew, boots scraped against the ancient floor, and the sound of heavy breathing filled the small space. N ducked a wild swing, grabbing a rival by the shoulder and spinning him into the path of another. It was a chaotic mess of limbs and desperate shoves. Suddenly, a sharp crack echoed through the clearing. One of the rival chefs pulled a pistol, his arm jerking as he fired toward the center of the altar. The bullet missed, striking a glowing gem embedded deep within the wall. A high-pitched whine vibrated through the air, followed by a sickening crunch of stone. The bullet had not pierced the gem, it had shattered the seal. The ground beneath them buckled. A massive tremor rolled through the temple, throwing everyone off balance. Dust poured from the ceiling, choking the air. In the center of the wall, the massive stone statue known as Laura began to shift. Deep fissures spider-webbed across her chest, and the stone groaned like a dying beast. The floor tilted, forcing the group to scramble for purchase. The statue was cracking open, and the light leaking from within was blinding. The blinding light surged, tearing through the temple interior and forcing everyone to shield their eyes. The stone shell of the statue shattered, falling away in massive, heavy chunks that slammed into the floor. Laura stepped forward, her movement fluid and impossibly fast. The rival chefs scrambled backward, their boots sliding on the shifting stone. One of them raised a weapon, his hand shaking, but the light consumed his aim. Laura raised her hand, palm open. A wave of golden energy rippled outward like a sudden, scorching wind. The air grew thick and heavy, humming with a low frequency. The energy wave hit the rival chefs with the force of a tidal surge. Their frantic movements halted instantly. Skin hardened, limbs locked in place. Within seconds, the group of rivals stood as solid, unmoving gold statues, their expressions of shock etched permanently into the metal. Jaden, Taro, Lemon, Anne, and Sherpa stood motionless, their chests heaving, eyes wide as they stared at the golden figures. Laura turned her gaze toward Uzi, her expression unreadable. With a sharp, sudden motion, she reached into the hollow space behind the altar and pulled out a heavy, pulsating slab of meat and a small, glowing glass vial. She tossed them through the air. Uzi lunged forward, catching the meat with both hands and tucking the vial into her pocket before it could hit the floor. The weight of the items dragged her hands down, the surface of the meat radiating a strange, intense heat. Laura did not wait. She flicked her wrist, a sharp, cracking sound echoing as the golden statues of the rival chefs were swept aside, sliding across the floor and vanishing into the dark, yawning depths. The floor groaned, the entire structure beginning to tilt and groan under the strain of the shifting stone. "Move!" Uzi shouted, her voice cutting through the heavy air. The group scrambled toward the exit, boots pounding against the cracked stone tiles. They sprinted past the crumbling pillars, the ceiling shedding debris. They burst out into the clearing, the humid jungle air hitting them with sudden force. They dove into the plain, the engines already whining with anticipation. The diner lights flickered to life as the group burst through the back entrance. Uzi did not pause. She slammed the heavy slab of meat onto the stainless steel prep table and fired up the industrial stove. The burners roared, blue flames licking the underside of the iron pans. She poured the glowing vial of sauce into the searing heat. A rich, metallic aroma instantly flooded the room, thick and heavy, clinging to the air like smoke. Jaden, Taro, Lemon, Anne, and Sherpa stood around the counter, their hands still trembling from the flight. The sizzling sound of the meat hitting the grill drowned out the distant hum of the city outside. Uzi plated the food, sliding the steaming dishes across the counter. No one spoke. They picked up their forks, the metal clinking against the ceramic plates. Each of them took a single, deliberate bite. The flavor hit them with the force of a physical impact. The diner fell into a total, heavy silence. For a long minute, the only sound was the steady ticking of the clock. The silence in the diner held for a long time, broken only by the hum of the refrigerator. Jaden looked at his plate, then at the others, all of them still processing the impossible flavor. The front door creaked, the hinges groaning against the stillness of the night. A figure stepped into the light. It was Laura. Her skin, once hard and gray like mountain granite, rippled and smoothed, shifting into the soft, warm tones of a human. She walked toward the counter with a steady, measured gait, her boots clicking against the linoleum floor. The group watched, frozen, as she pulled out a stool and sat down. She did not look at the temple or the ingredients. She looked at the menu board above the grill. She pointed to the house special. "One burger," she said, her voice resonant and deep. Uzi moved on instinct, turning back to the stove to flip a patty. The sizzle of the meat returned, filling the room with a familiar, comforting sound. Laura leaned forward, resting her elbows on the counter. She had been asleep for 1,000 years, trapped in stone and silence. And now, the weight of that millennium seemed to lift. She turned to Ann and Sherpa, asking a simple question about the city outside. The tension of the hunt dissolved completely. They began to talk, their voices blending into the low, steady rhythm of the diner. The journey was over.